Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So this presentation, the idea of community benefits agreements, from our perspective, is really about how to build a strategy to build power for the long run, to actually dramatically change the way our communities look, the ones, especially the ones that are continually spiraling down into poverty with terrible quality of environment, lack of access to the basic decisions, how to actually reverse that trend by using the land use process, but thinking about it very strategically, about primarily how to win. So just a word or two about my background, because I actually come from two perspectives, and hopefully that can spark some questions. I am a founder and executive director of LANE, which is a different kind of community organization. We bring together skills in research, community organizing, communications, and policy all under one roof. And that's really part of our philosophy, is to have the comprehensive program to be able to win major changes in policy and in community development. About 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, a coalition of labor unions and community groups negotiated with then mayor to actually have me appointed to the city's redevelopment agency board. So for the last 5 years, I've actually sat on, I've been one of 7 members of the board of the largest redevelopment agency in the country. And I was reappointed about a year ago by our current mayor, Antonio Villaraigosa, fortunately with some supporters, some additional progressives besides myself. So for the last couple of years, I've had an experience of actually really trying to being able to move some change. I mean, it's still not easy, but it's possible. So I'm going to start with some of the basics about what CBAs are. CBAs can be a lot of things. We basically made that idea, we made the name up. So I'm going to give you some examples about community benefits agreements as they're known, but also really push you to think about CBAs as the broad idea of ensuring that community benefits come out of major development, both subsidized development as well as any major land use change. The idea that development should benefit communities as was described in the original equity principles. So what we're going to talk about today is based on our LA experience, but there have now been CBAs adopted in dozens of cities, and I actually think the list is missing some. As I mentioned, CBAs can actually be a separate agreement, or they can be a program incorporated into the public documents of approval for a major project. And this is one thing that I'd like to get back to in the end, and maybe you can ask some questions about it. Project-based CBAs, which is fundamentally what we're going to talk about today, can and really have to lead to major changes in policy, so that we're not focused, we don't have to put all the resources into organizing and doing all the research and everything we need to win a CBA on one project, when, for example, in Los Angeles, there were about 490 projects that came over the agendas for the city's redevelopment agency in the last 2 years. So there's no community organization, there's no labor organization that's going to be able to organize and do all the work needed to get CBAs on 490 projects. So, and those are major projects. So, so really what we need to be thinking about is how to build the power to institutionalize the concept of community benefits as a goal of all development, meaning good jobs, affordable housing, good environment, and a voice in the process. So why are CBAs needed? I don't think I need to talk too much to this audience about why CBAs are needed. But we've had massive increases in public investment in redevelopment. At the same time, we've had the trend toward the market rules, and we should just let the market do its thing. We've had this, at the same time, we've had this kind of opposing trend, which is billions and billions of dollars going to private enterprise with the idea that the benefits will trickle down and eventually reach the bottom, which we know is not the case and never happens. The other trend that we've seen, and all of us have seen this, is the trend toward processing. Basically, you have city planning departments, and they're not city planning departments, they're city processing departments, right? They have people who are sitting behind desks, and they are processing requests for permits or requests for major land use changes. They're not planning what this community should look like. So that's been a major trend. The other thing that's really important to recognize and to educate ourselves about, and I know there's some differences in the South with this concept, but in many, many states throughout the country, in California, I know this for a fact, cities have extensive and deep land use powers. Cities basically can say what should go in a place, what industry should be the focus, not only where the money should go, but what kind of things should be developed in a certain parcel or in a certain region. Cities have what are called police powers, which basically say they can do almost anything that's not preempted by federal law. So what we've got is a bunch of wimpy legislators who are just afraid to death and think that they can't do anything. The truth is that they have tremendous power, except, again, for some places that I've seen in the South where the power really lies at the state level, not the city. And really the idea of a community benefits, and this is the selling point to developers, as we build our power, it becomes more and more difficult for developers to get their projects through. And it costs a lot of money to wait a long time. So the idea of community benefits is to find the win-win so that everybody can feel like we won something important. Okay, so what is a CBA? Now again, I'm encouraging you to think about CBAs in a broad way, but for this specific purpose, CBA is a project-specific enforceable agreement. So it's a contract. It's an enforceable contract. It's not a bunch of promises. It's not a letter that says we'll try to. It's not a best efforts or commercially reasonable. It is an enforceable contract that is generally signed by the developer, a community labor, environmental coalition or individual groups, and a city or a public authority, and for the creation of a range of community benefits. And what can be on this list is almost unlimited. There are very few limitations that have to do with federal law, but basically creativity is the limit. So what does the city planning process look like without a CBA? Now this is if we know about the projects, as I heard a sister talking about earlier. Most often there's the developer and there's the city, and then everybody else doesn't know anything about the project until there's a shovel in the ground, and then it's too late. But typically the planning process or the development approval process goes like this. You have the developer working with the city, and then you have all of these different disparate groups with their different separate interests that are pressuring the city for what they want. The idea of a CBA is for all the groups to be organized early on in the process into a coalition to the greatest extent possible, and to have bilateral or multilateral relationships between this coalition, the developer, him or herself, as well as the city or the redevelopment agency. Okay, now this